Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it is back. Well, I am back. Anyways, UFC, another travel card. So you know it's good. We're cracking on down to UFC Saudi Arabia in Riyadh. What is the arena's name? A&B? That's kind of lame. I was hoping for something cool, but A&B Arena in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia for an 11 fight card coming to you on February the 1st at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. That's early. That's early. So I'm probably going to be watching this one fairly alone because my usual buddies, Javier and Devoid, who doesn't get a first name because he won't use his first name, are off in California. So it'll probably just be me. I imagine they're not getting up at 6 a.m. for this fight card, which is it's pretty good. It's pretty solid. The main event is relevant and interesting. A little sad because of what Israel Adesanya has kind of fallen to. Shara Bullet, Michael Venom Page. I'll get into it. I don't like that matchmaking. Not that it's going to be a bad fight. Actually, I think it's going to be a reasonably fun fight, but there are some things I don't like about that. Pavlovich versus Rosenstruck. It's heavyweight, but I mean, as heavyweight fights go, it's fine. Looking forward to Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. Looking forward to Fares Ziam versus Mike Davis. Looking reasonably forward to Muhammad Naimov versus Khan Offley, even though I think it's a bit one-sided. Gaziv and Peterson can burn in a fire. McKinney versus Hadzovic is a fight that really has no meaning whatsoever to it, other than I guess there is a world in which McKinney just completely loses any stock, I guess. But it's a fun fight. It's an action fight. It's gonna be quick. Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Myra Bueno Silva. Bizarrely low on the card. It is the third fight of the night. I know. It's Saudi Arabia, the women's fights. But I feel like if you're going to put it down this low, just don't put it on the card. It is a battle between a former title contender at 135, admittedly coming back down to 125, and Jasudavicius, who Tapology's got at number 14 in the world. The UFC rankings have her at... I know she's ranked. Where are you? Number 12. So it's got her at number 12 in the world by the UFC's own logic. So should be higher up. Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. That's a dope action fight. Love it. Love that fight. And Hamdi El Del Wahad versus Jamal Pogues. You know what? I was looking forward to Hamdi El Del Wahad coming back. I'm not sure I'm going to love this fight necessarily, but it's good to see him back. And the fight was good. The card was going to be even more solid with Ikram Aliskerov versus Andre Muniz pulling out with some passport issues. Jordan Leavitt versus Abdul Karim El Sawadi would have been fine. I don't like the El Sawadi Bolajaoki fight, which was originally be on the card. I just think that that's a bad matchup. But anyways, let's get into this. Well, you know what? Let's unpack what has been a busy day. Or week anyways in MMA. You had the Paul Hughes versus Usman Nurmagomedov fight over in PFL/Bellator. So PFL Tour. That has had an interesting reaction because there seems to be two extremes going on. On one side, that Paul Hughes and Usman Nurmagomedov are world-class top guys. That they would beat dudes easily in the top 5 in the UFC, which I do not believe. But there's also the other extreme, which is this is just Usman Nurmagomedov getting completely exposed, and that's not the case either. These two are just actually really good fighters, really really good fighters. If the UFC were to sign them tomorrow, bring them into the UFC, they would be very quickly knocking on the door of rankings without really any doubt in my mind. Now, are they as good as Islam Makhachev? No. Are they even as good as, say, Justin Gaethje? Not really. It was just kind of weird. There were people simultaneously saying that Usman Nurmagomedov would get wasted by Renato Moicano, and another group saying that he would absolutely roll over Max Holloway. And it's that is just very weird. What are we doing? I know there are hype trains, but the juxtaposition, the diversity, I guess, on that was quite surprising. Anyways, it's a good fight if you want to go watch it. It's pretty fun, pretty decent. The card itself is not great, but hey, it's fun. And then of course Bryce Mitchell coming out is I don't want to say a Nazi, I don't want to say a Holocaust denier, because at least in the clip I saw, I don't think it gets there. But coming out is like really kind of pro Hitler, which has caused a whole kind of, a conversation that's always going on, but like now is just louder in the MMA community. And I wish it would really go away. Now, as far as Bryce Mitchell is concerned, there's a debate going on about should the UFC do anything about him, freedom of speech, blah, blah, blah. Here's the thing. UFC fighters will say dumb stuff. They are involved in a violent sport, and I've said this over and over again. They should not be role models. They should not be viewed as deep thinkers. They should not be viewed as philosophers. It's my main problem with Sean Strickland. It's not that I want Sean Strickland to shut up. It's not that I want Sean Strickland to get fired. It's not that I don't want Sean Strickland to be given, relatively high profile fights. He is one of the 10, if not 5 best middleweights of the world, and that is that. It's that there's like a weird take where like people are like, hey, man, oh man, Sean Strickland said this. This man is such a deep thinker. It made me reevaluate my life. That's happening with Bryce Mitchell too. And I'm like, oh God, why? This is a guy, to quote Dana White, who drilled his own nutsack and then reversed it out of his nut. Like, it's so bad. It's so bad. The guy is just crazy and nuts. The only issue I have is that Dana White has kind of mastered this whole thing of like presenting himself as one thing and having a track record that does not in any way back it up. He's like, I'm not going to cut Bryce Mitchell. I'm not going to punish Bryce Mitchell because freedom of speech, I'm a big believer in it. This is a guy who has cut people for talking about fighter unions, has cut people for making jokes. Miguel Torres comes to mind. Let's be real here. Dana, you're not cutting him because you may have a personal problem with it, whatever the case may be. But it comes down to, and to be clear, he's cut people for being like Nazis in the past. Benjamin Brimza, I think, was the German fighter that they cut after there was some pictures of him with neo-Nazis. Like just pictures, like not even necessarily like ties to a neo-Nazi organization. And to be clear, if you're involved in the German MMA scene, which Brisbane was, there's probably some photos out there with some air quote fans. That is not great. I'm just gonna say that. It used to be like the case with like, bikers and stuff and that kind of thing. Like, Nazis kind of the new thing there. And realistically, I just want people to call a spade in this regard. Dana White does what he thinks is good for business. He thinks having Bryce Mitchell on the roster is good for business. He thinks that this is actually going to bring more attention, more eyeballs, and therefore potentially not necessarily more money, because of course the UFC is working on a relatively fixed income for their events. But, a number to point at when they're coming to negotiate the next TV deal to be like, hey, we are the hot product, man. We are the hot product. We popped that rating. Let's go. Or whatever it is. Is it called a rating with the whole streaming services? I don't even know. All right, let's get into the fights. Let's do this. Main event, Israel Adesanya versus Nassourdine Imavov. The second V got cut off on my notes. There we go. I don't trust Israel Adesanya. I do think that there is something fundamentally not happening with him right now. And what I think about that is that it's not that he's not able to fight. He still has good technique, good form. The lack of pace that he's had in and cardio against DDP particularly doesn't actually really concern me that much, because he's always been a kind of relatively low output guy. Like if you wanted him to fight high output, you have to press him. So I'm not really worried about that part. What I am worried about is that there is like no mid-fight adjustments going on for him. Like even in the win over Alex Bahia, not really there. And in the Sean Strickland fight, definitely not there. In the DDP fight, really not there. So that is the concern, is that there's no adaptation. There's no, and he used to be able to do that. There used to be a free flowing, adaptive fighter, Israel Adesanya. It doesn't seem to be there anymore. So that robs him of a lot of potential effectiveness. Now, if we look at Nassourdine Imavov, there is nothing there that exploits that. Imavov is himself predominantly a range striker with less range and less height and less technique and less skills at that range. And people are like, well, he takes people down. He has a better wrestling. And I do believe he has the better wrestling. But tell me something real quick here. When has Nassourdine Imavov been the guy to make a fight a wrestling fight? Like, I know UFC stats are kind of gross, but like, didn't take Brendan Allen down. 2 takedowns against Jared Cannonier over the course of 4 rounds. None against Roman Dolidze. 3 against Chris Curtis. That's Chris Curtis. What are you going to do? Nothing against Sean Strickland. 2 against Joaquin Buckley, a small middleweight. None against Edmund Shabazian. 1 against Ian Heinisch. 0 against Phil Haas. 1 against Diabetes Man Jordan Williams. What I'm getting at here is that the fights that he has good, his wrestling is not him doing the wrestling most of the time. It is counter wrestling that he is good at. And Izzy's not going to give him like wrestling to counter. Like, that's not on the table. And Imavov himself doesn't fight at a super high pace. So like, when I'm talking about like Israel Adesanya has always had a little bit of cardio issues. He's not really a high output kind of guy. It's not what Imavov does either. Like, Imavov is not going to go out there and like be swanging for the fences. Again, like he has a couple of like high strike count fights in his career. Obviously, 123 against Sean Strickland, 112 against Roman Dolidze. But like, it is worth noting that in both of those fights, number 1, 5 rounders. Number 2, Strickland just kind of forces a pace on you, and you either match it or you get drowned in it. And Dolidze was a walking punching bag. So there is that. Little higher output against Jared Cannonier. Sure. That's on the table there. But like, he went to decision with Phil Haas landing 57 strikes. He went to decision with Jordan Williams, landing 68 strikes. He got to nearly 2 rounds with Edmund Shabazian before finishing him on 42 significant strikes. 51 against Buckley in a 3-round fight. Like, it's not like he's massively high paced. And like, when he is high paced, it's somebody else driving the pace, him matching the pace to survive. And that is really about it. So like, at the end of the day, I'm picking Israel Adesanya. So I'm picking him. I'm picking him by decision. So Adesanya minus 157 to minus 170. Imavov plus 125 to plus 140. Those are bettable odds either way. Shara Magomedov versus Michael Venom Page, aka MVP. I'm going to be going with Shara Bullet versus MVP. They have like very prominent nicknames. They are the share of the card. I wouldn't trust me on this fight because these are both fighters that like I'm chronically trying to get a handle. I've been largely picking against Shara Bullet for a good chunk of his UFC career because there's like a significant, like, obviously his eyeball, like his vision concerns me in a nutshell. But, he did beat Michael Oleksiejczuk, a fight that I thought he was going to lose. He did beat Bruno Silva, a fight I thought he was going to lose. I did pick him to beat Antonio Tricoli, so no comment there. And then he did beat Armen Petrosyan, even though, I think some of that fight showed some issues. But like, the thing here is that Shara Bullet is really, really reliant on the fact that he is actually really fast and pretty big. He's a 6'2" guy at middleweight. 73-inch reach is nothing amazing, but like, he tends to be have a longer reach than his opponent. Let me see here. Let me see a little something here. I might be wrong on this, and I should have looked it up beforehand. But let's see here. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold. My apologies. Okay, so I know before he got to the UFC, it was a lot of guys really short of them. Yeah, like, okay, so Armin Petrosian is 6'3", but he only has a 71-inch reach, has freakishly short arms. Freakishly lack of reach. Anytime you have a guy who's got a reach that's lower than his height, it's just weird. Michael Oleksiejczuk, 6'74", so maybe like semi reach parity, but that was a really messy fight. Tricoli can't strike, so it doesn't matter that he's 6'5" with any injury. I don't even know what Tricoli's supposed to be good at. And then like Bruno Silva, 6'74". So like this is the first fight that we're gonna see Shara Bullet out there fighting somebody who has a notably longer kicking range than him and a notable longer punching range, because Michael Venom Page is 6'3" with a 79-inch reach. He's coming up a weight class, but he was always like very huge, very tall, very lanky for the weight class at 170, and he's still gonna be at 185. So, yeah, Sharp Bullet has, powerful kicking game. He's fast. The technique is a bit sloppy. He has probably a more proven grappling game than Michael Venom Page does, because it's Michael Venom Page. But I don't really foresee him grappling with him a ton. I assume this is going to be a more or less stand-up fight. The reason I don't like it is that Michael Venom Page will suck some of the fun out of Sharp Bullet, unless he just gets nuked right away, which it's on the table. And he did it against Ian Gary as well, where everyone was like really high on Ian Gary. And then he fought Michael Venom Page and like had a lot of the hype sucked out of him. This is kind of the same thing. You're kind of feeding these guys that you're relatively hoping to make something out of to Michael Venom Page. And I'm not saying you can't do that, but you really do need to pick guys who don't rely on range to make that happen. Which brings me to Michael Venom Page, a fantastic sort of points karate kickboxer who's very fast in his own right, very tall, very lanky. Again, 6'3", 79 inches. It's insane. It's ridiculous. And, really good striking skill. Not a good MMA fighter, because there's a whole lacking part of his game, but you actually have to make him do that if you're going to capitalize on that. So I'm going with MVP. I'm trusting him to manage the range, utilize his reach, utilize his cleaner technical kicking game, and just kind of also like, good evasive footwork, big cage. Yeah. I wouldn't trust me on this. Again, I've had a wretched time picking Michael Venom Page fights. I've had a wretched time picking Shara Bullet fights. But I do honestly believe that this is just a stylistic matchup that MVP wins. So Shara Bullet minus 185 to minus 215. MVP, I will be betting money on at plus 150 to plus 165. I'll have to see what betting line I can get personally and like figure out which book I want to go in. I tend to want to keep it like, localized. Sergey Pavlovich versus Jairzinho Rozenstruik. My first thought here was that Pavlovich would win because he's one of the best heavyweights in the world, even though he's not really technically all that good. He's just like a bonker, but like he is a bonker, like aggressive bonker, heavy power, can knock out anybody. And that's still on the table, but then I was like really thinking, I'm like, who's beaten Jairzinho Rozenstruik by bonking him? And it's Francis Ngannou, one of the most powerful fighters in the history of MMA. And it's, for some reason, Alexander Volkov, who I do not really think of as a finisher or a bonker, but like there was that weird like knockout he had where it was like, oh my God, Rozenstruik is done, because nobody should get deaded by Volkov like that. But, that was a couple of fights ago now. Rozenstruik went back out there and beat Shamil Gaziev, beat Tai Tuivasa. So yeah. Again, I cannot emphasize this enough. The winner of this fight is probably the one who lands a power strike really cleanly and bonks the other guy and puts him down. That is probably, for all the analytical stuff and the technical stuff I'm going to break down here, that is probably what this comes down to. But Rozenstruik has a really, really good feel for counter-striking. He really does find that chin against some like really actually very solid strikers. And Pavlovich defensively is a mess. Like, he will give counter opportunities because his own game is based on the bonking overpoweringness. So I gotta go with Rosenstruck. I am not going to be surprised if we're 15 seconds into this fight and Rosenstruck is lying dead on the ground because Sergey Pavlovich hit him with a nuclear missile, a weapon of mass destruction that is his right hand. But stylistically, assuming technique has any play here, it is Rosenstruck that is the pick. So TKO Rosenstruck is the pick. Pavlovich is minus 290 to minus 335, plus 235 to plus 260. Even if you do believe Pavlovich is going to win this fight, what are you doing betting on him at like minus 300? Like, don't do that. Rosenstruck is durable and for a heavyweight actually has fairly decent technique on defense. So again, betting on Rosenstruck. Second underdog in a row. Said Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira, battle of two massive bantamweights. Some weird matchmaking here by the UFC because I think Oliveira carries relatively little hype into this, and like Said Nurmagomedov is a guy that I thought they were trying to build into something. Maybe they gave up on him. They're like, we have enough Dagestani fighters. We're gonna roll on. We're gonna leave you behind. But there was a time when I think they were very, very high on him. Said is one of the kicky Dagestani fighters, kind of in the vein of Zabit Magomed Sharapov. Has good wrestling, but it's like largely counter wrestling. Has an aggressive submission game as well. He'll go for the neck a lot. His front headlock is actually quite nice. And he does have like that 5'8" frame at 135 that, gives him a certain level of, 70-inch reach is not huge, but like it gives him the arms to get those submissions in there fairly well. And he has two relative drawbacks in the fact that he's, number one, he's fairly injury prone. I want to say he's had a lot of pullouts from fights. I may eat my words here on Tapology. Yeah, he pulled out of a fight with Daniel Marcos. He pulled out of a fight with Montel Jackson. Pulled out of a fight with Kyler Phillips. Pulled out of a fight with Jack Shore. That's like in the last 4 years. There's also a Ronnie Barcelos fight he pulled out of. So like, relatively injury prone, a little physically frail. And there's a couple of fights where he's had moments where he just like it's like he loses interest in the fight. He's not even like horrendously losing or anything, and he sometimes comes back to win those fights, but there does appear to be a certain mentality into him that can break a little bit under like the right circumstances. But he really only loses to really, really good fighters, or at least like very, very close to like really, really good fighters. I've kind of always had a love-hate relationship with Jonathan Martinez, but like Jonathan Martinez, Ronnie Barcelos, Magomed Bibulatov, who, if you're not familiar with like the outside of the UFC scene, that's a name that probably doesn't mean all that much to you. But dude has been kind of like ACA's golden boy. Couple of losses, don't get me wrong. He's beatable. But like he is, he's a really solid fighter. So when you look at those names, they're fairly impressive. And then on the other side of things, he's beaten Muin Gafarov, who's making a bit of run now. Saeed Yakub Kakramanov, who the UFC was crazy to let go. Douglas Silva DeAndrade, and Cody Stamann. He also has a win in the UFC over Mark Striegel, Justin Scoggins, and Ricardo Ramos, but they have their own problems. Striegel's just not very good. Scoggins was a flyweight that had no business being at bantamweight, except that he couldn't make flyweight regularly enough. And then Ricardo Ramos. What is Scoggins up to anyways? And Ricardo Ramos is just like a weird mess of a fighter. What is Scoggins up to these days? Kind of retired by the looks of it. Last fight was at Mecca 22. I don't even know what that promotion is. Lost to a guy named Victor Diaz. Look that up later. Anyways, is Vinicius Oliveira a really, really, really good fighter? Or does he sound like the guys who usually lose to Said Nurmagomedov? I think it's the latter. He is really, really big. He's really, really physical, but he's a mess. Like, he has a violent striking game, but it's one that I do not trust the technicality of or the defensive aspects of. And he has a weak wrestling game. And I know somebody's going to look at the stats from the Ricky Simon fight and see that Simone went 2 for 11 on takedowns against Oliveira and be like, weak wrestling game? How? I invite you to look at the Bernardo Sopai fight where Sopai went 3 for 4 against him, and then like some regional fights. Like the wrestling is not great. The Simone fight is a referendum on like where Ricky Simone is right now, which is not in a good place mentally. Kind of like the bantamweight Colby Covington in the sense that like the thing that brought him to the dance and made him effective is something he seems afraid to do now. So, yeah. So I've got to go with Saeed. I mean, Saeed Nurmagomedov again is not a guy who like really imposes his wrestling necessarily. I want to say that he's like had very few like high takedown performances. I could be wrong on this. I could be forgetting something, but like my memory of this stuff is like a lot of counter wrestling. Okay, he got 3 takedowns against Jonathan Martinez, 1 against Scoggins, and 1 against Douglas De Silva de Andrade, and 5 against Muin Gaffarov. But no, pardon me. That's that strikes. That strikes. It's a minute and 13 seconds. It's not takedowns. Not takedowns at all. There you go. But I am going to pick him. I think that like he has a more reliable striking game, and he has a relatively close to physical parity, like physicality to Oliveira. And I really do think that Oliveira like has to be like a good mile above his opponent physically before I really consider picking him. He's overachieved in the UFC a little bit, so maybe he'll keep overachieving in my opinion. But I don't think he's that good. I think he's fun. I think he's a fun action fighter. And I want to see him around. There are a lot of guys I want to see Vinicius Oliveira fight. It's just, I don't see him knocking on the door of like a ranking spot. And I definitely could see Said Nurmagomedov doing that. So Nurmagomedov by decision is the pick. He is a minus 159 to minus 168 favorite. Oliveira plus 128 to plus 136. That's a little tighter than I expected, to be honest. Mike Davis versus Fares Ziam. I'm a big fan of Mike Davis. I think he's huge at 155 for one thing. And apparently made 145 back in the day, which is mind-boggling. Like I am confused by that. I don't understand. I don't know what to make of that. And yeah, he's a beast physically. He's surprisingly well-rounded. He's a really actually pretty technical striker and like a good grappler. There's, I think, a lack of a killer instinct to him. I think he's a bit too nice for the sport, to be honest. Like, seems like a super nice dude. And I'm not saying you can't have a killer instinct with that. Steve Wonderboy Thompson is like the master of the Jekyll and Hyde thing. But like, there are some times where like there are fights that like you could end this if you were like a little more meaner, a little bit more psychotic. And he doesn't. That's his major weakness. And then for us, Fares Ziam is a fighter I've always had a really weird feeling about, of fragility and breakability. That I understand that he is 6-2 in the UFC, and he's beaten some quality guys. He's beaten Jai Herbert, who I rate reasonably highly, and Jamie Malarkey, who's the type of guy that I would think would bring the pressure to break him. And I picked both of them to beat him, and then he beat them. But I can't shake the feeling. Like, this is going to be the least non-heavyweight analytical pick of the night. Is realistically, I just don't trust Ziam. I can't figure it out. I can't. There's something that feels fragile. There's something that feels breakable about him. I don't know what to do with that. And like I said, he's fighting a physically imposing, huge dude who I think is very good. So I'm going to go with Mike Davis by submission. He's minus 140 to minus 150. Ziam is plus 114 to plus 122. The easiest pick for me on the night is Naimov versus Con Offley. I just don't really think Con Offley's all that good. He's scrappy. He's got good leg kicks. He's fairly well-rounded, which I respect. And like there's a certain adaptability to him. Like even in his tough fights where like he would figure things out during the fight, and I respect that. But like he's a 5'7", 66-inch reach, 145er with a wrestling game that is not amazing. And it's hard to see that working. It's really hard for me to see that coming through. There may have been a beep that you guys heard. That was my headset turning off. So yeah, I've got to go with Naimov, who himself is a pretty big dude. 5'9", 70-inch reach, 145. Thick, tank-like guy in his own right. Strong, durable. Don't let the loss to Felipe Lima fool you, because Felipe Lima is actually quite good. Short notice against him is a really hard ask. He's a good athlete. He's a capable range striker. He's pretty technical. There are some weaknesses to Naimov's game. There is some like stupidity he has where like he'll try some big things that really have no business working, and he will cheat his ass off. We learned that against Nathaniel Wood, and I have no doubt that he'll do that here as well. So I'm going with Naimov by TKO. Awfully has been hurt in the past by fighters who are not necessarily the hitter that Naimov is. Like I said, Naimov is just good. I don't really want him to have success because he does cheat a lot. I respect the if you ain't treating, you ain't trying logic of MMA, but like it's a bit excessive at times. Odds, Naimov is a minus 325 to minus 350 favorite, plus 250 to plus 275 on Awfully. Shamil Gaziev versus Thomas Peterson is a bad heavyweight fight. It is the fight I'm looking forward to the least on this card because I really do not think either of these guys are very good. It doesn't mean that they won't win in the UFC, but they are flawed technically, and they also both have like bad gas tanks, which really, really obviously it gets in my craw. Peterson is a capable clinch wrestler, and that's about it. I don't really think that that's a way to win fights, but hey. I mean, I guess you could argue Sergey Spivak, Marcin Tybura have done it. But like they're also like really, really durable, really tough guys. Or at least Tybura is. And actually like pretty opportunistic wrestlers, which probably grapplers, I should say, submission hunters. Which I don't think Peterson actually really is. Like a lot of his submissions just kind of brute force, and I don't think that's going to come to the UFC, but hey. He did win last time out. He did beat, it was Mo Usman he beat, right? Yeah, he beat Mo Usman, but Mo Usman is not good. I'm going to go Gaziev. He's a hard-hitting guy. He's got a good clinch wrestling game of his own. So, like, if they do get into clinch and if they do get to wrestling in there and the Greco-Roman stuff and the judo stuff and so on, Gaziev is more than capable of handling that. He's got cardio issues, but like he hits really, really hard, and he's broken guys tougher than Peterson, I think. Like Martin Budai. So Gaziev by TKO, he's a minus 333 to minus 350 favorite. Peterson's plus 250 to plus 280. There you go. Terrence McKinney versus Damir Hadzovic is I hate to have to trust Terrence McKinney here, but like I kind of have to. Like, as glass cannon as he is, as offensively potent but defensively blank as he is, and as cardio deficient as he is because he falls apart after about one round, Hadzovic is 38 years old and coming off a 2.5-year layoff, like to the point where like I saw him on this card and was like, did he go and like rip it up in the regional scene and I just completely missed it, and now he's back in the UFC? Because I don't get this. I don't understand what we doing here. Hadzovic is, like I said, in his late 30s and has not fought since July of 2023 against Mark Diakese. And keep in mind, before that was not exactly on a roll. He beat Yancy Medeiros, but he lost to Hanato Moicano and Christos Giagos. Giagos has been cut. I think Diakese has been cut too now at this point. Or not with the company. I don't know about cut. And also like a loss to Alain Patrick. He's not without wins. He knocked out Polo Reyes. He knocked out Marcin Held. He won a decision against Nick Hine. There's some things there, but like, coming off the shelf at 38 years old, 2.5 years out, and getting Terrence McKinney, I just have to think he gets overwhelmed by McKinney, and McKinney does his thing and probably rear naked chokes him. But Hadzovic also has power, so like, if he survives and he gets to the point where like he can live up to his Bosnian Bomber nickname, probably knock him out. McKinney is a prohibitive favorite at minus 500 to minus 520. Hadzovic is plus 333 to plus 390. If you're betting on McKinney at those odds, stop, reevaluate your life, and move on. I'm putting money on Hadzovic. I don't even think he's going to win, but like you can't You can't give me a plus 300 underdog against Terrence McKinney that has power and have me have any hope that I'm not going to take that. Jasmine Jasudavicius versus Mayra Bueno Silva, MBS. A year ago, this was an easy pick for Mayra Bueno Silva, but then she lost to Macy Chiasson. And it's just kind of looked bad. Like, she's coming back down to 125 after a 135 run that saw her get a title shot and so on. She's still, like, physically potent. She's got power, pop in her hand. She's got strength. She's got an aggressive submission game. But, like, it's just all not imposing in the fight. Like, if you want to fight somewhere with her, she's going to let you have that. And it's kind of not good. And like, I also just don't like the 125 cut again. Don't get me wrong. She fits 125 better, but like it feels like she's saying my problems at 135 were related to size. They just weren't. It's not that she didn't fight bigger fighters. Jason should be at 145. Holm is also huge, but like, she beat Holm. It's you have bad fight IQ. You have bad game plans. You have bad reads. You have bad technique. You haven't developed as a fighter. You've been getting away with being a bully. That's all it is. Jasudavicius is kind of a lot like Chiasson in the sense that primarily wrestler grappler, likes to clinch. Generally has her way in the clinch. Doesn't have great ways of getting the fight to the ground otherwise. She's got good ground and pound. She doesn't have the submissions that Chiasson does, but she's got better striking and really, really actually impressive ground and pound for women's MMA. So I'm going to go with Jasudavicius by decision, which I thought was going to be a hot take. I thought I was going to be picking another underdog here. Turns out Jasudavicius is minus 250 to minus 275. So I'll be betting on Mayra Bueno Silva at plus 200 to plus 220. Bogdan Grad versus Lucas Alexander. This is a very good action fight. I have a lot of questions about where these guys can actually go in the UFC. Alexander has good cardio. He has reasonably decent technique and is like a good volume action fighter. Like, really, really fun. And got knocked out by Jekka Sergi last time out. Which is really, really concerning because Sergi is very bad. And Bogdan Grad is dangerous. Likes to do spinning back fist stuff. Likes to hit with power. Likes to load things up. Doesn't have the greatest chin himself. Couple of stoppages, losses in there. And had a really, really fun fight with Michael Aswell on the Dana White Contenders Series, and also lost to Tom Nolan on the Dana White Contenders Series, which is really problematic because I am of the opinion that Tom Nolan is not good. He's just 6'3" and huge. That's my take. And his run in the UFC hasn't really dissuaded me of that. So, fun fight. Two guys who are a bit chinny. Alexander is the more volume fighter, the guy who can push a little bit of a pace. And if it goes to decision, I tend to think he'll win. But like, I think he'll give Grad enough chances to like land his dynamic, potent offense of his own and probably get a knockout at some point. Looking forward to it. Fight of the night possibility here. Should be really, really fun. Alexander is minus 115 to minus 130. Grad is minus 105 to plus 105. I am entirely fine with those odds. This is basically a pick'em fight. Hamdi Abdelwahad versus Jamal Pogues. Talking about guys who've been away for 2.5 years. Hamdi Abdelwahad for a lot of PEDs, if I recall correctly, and some injuries. Hamdi Abdelwahad is actually like, if he was just not 32 years old, I'd probably have like a lot of hopes for him. He has a actually pretty prestigious wrestling background, and like he's got the raw toughness and game scrappiness that heavyweight requires. He's really durable, really mentally tough. The fight he had with it was Dontel Mays, wasn't it? Pretty sure it was Dontel Mays in his UFC debut for his third ever fight. Go figure. Or his fourth ever MMA fight. Now, to be clear, he also has a couple of like kind of like bare knuckle boxing fights in here as well. So like there's some stuff and like a couple of amateur bouts, but yeah, he really impressed me. I'm not gonna say he's good, but like for a lower down heavyweight, he's got a takedown game. He's super durable, and his striking, as ugly as it is, and as loopy as it is, and as overhand base as it is a good time. So I'm gonna take Hamdi Abdelwahad here against Jamal Pogues who's a perfectly fine fighter, but like I think lacks the thing at heavyweight that you need, which is power. Because he's a decent enough wrestler. He's a good cardio guy for heavyweight. He works at a decent pace, but there is never really any like spark moment for him. Like that's been his UFC fights. It's been him not necessarily like losing, but like being unable to like have a big moment to actually hurt somebody. That was the McParkin fight in a lot of ways, although he also got outstruck badly in that one. And then like, yeah, he beat Thomas Peterson, but like Thomas Peterson's bad. We've been through that. And then like Josh Parisian's bad. And then like his contender series fights are against fighters who are not good. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Hamdi Del Wahad because it would be a feel good thing where like a Del Wahad might actually be a little something something. Whereas Pogues, I think, is just like kind of in a permanent welcome to the UFC, Dana White contender guy role. Can you handle a guy who's tough and will actually like make you fight for 15 minutes? That's kind of it. So Hamdi Adel Wahab by decision. It's an even money fight. -110 to -125 on Adel Wahad. +105 to -110 on Pogues. I'm fine with that. I am perfectly fine with that odd set. Again, it's a pick 'em fight. You've had a guy who, again, I do have like think is like the higher ceiling, but he's been gone a long time. He's coming back, and of course, how much of his impressiveness was the PEDs? I kind of doubt it because he wasn't like super explosive or anything. He didn't have any of the hallmark like PED advantages. But we've seen that the role of PEDs and like the psyche of a fighter can be quite high. Anyways, that is all I've got. Enjoy the fights. I'll see you afterwards. Check out the links down below for video gaming stuff, social media, the MMA Fighting Discord, and that is all.